Let's look at the United Methodist bishops. So this is a group that I don't think we can have fellowship with. I think they serve a different Jesus. I think they proclaim a different gospel. Talked with Kim Reisman about that on the interview I had with her yesterday. We'll publish it tomorrow. But they just put out a statement on the election, which, if you've been watching these things, you can kind of anticipate the direction this goes. It's kind of brief. I thought we'd read over it and I would just, say a few words. So this is directly from the United Methodist Bishops.org website. United Methodist Church bishops issue statement on U.S. elections. So this was published yesterday. That's the president of the Council of Bishops, Tracy S. Malone. Here's the pastoral letter from the Council of Bishops of the UMC. Starts off with the scriptural quotation, "Now faith, hope, and love remain, and the greatest of these is love." So one of my primary critiques that I've issued of the religious left is that they start with the issues that scriptures point to, faith, hope, and love, and they define those subjectively. What do faith, hope, and love mean to me? And then they put that on the Bible and say, well, here's how what it has to mean, because I've defined what it has to mean. And you'll see that in the statement. So, greetings. May the grace of God and the peace of our Lord Jesus Christ be with your spirits. Amid the change and uncertainty that have resulted from the recent U.S. elections and the ways in which these matters will impact the whole world, we remember that we are held by the enduring power of God's love and the call to be agents of that love in the world. So if you watched Kamala Harris's speech, I think it was yesterday, maybe it was the day before, where she conceded defeat, she said some good and helpful stuff about peaceful transfer of power, about loving the country, about standing together and seeking unity, but there was also a call, we're going to keep fighting. And I find myself, it's not as though we should roll over. If we lost the election on the cultural right, and maybe we still did, but assuming the other side had lost the election, should they just roll over and give in to the direction things are going? No. But I guess I don't feel like this language of fighting is helpful. And I know I've said in different times we need to learn how to fight in a healthy and holy way. And there is a time for fighting. But I think when you're talking about what language can we use that's actually helpful for creating unity, it needs to be engaging in critical thought and discourse. This is the hard work that needs to be done. Do we have things to learn from one another? Yes, absolutely. But it shouldn't be done in a mode of fighting or contention or even in competition. It should be in an openness to the truth. And the thing that's such an enemy to this is the postmodern notions that there is no truth. And that's why you can't have conversations with some people. When they think all there is power and not truth, then you can't have a conversation with them. But as long as we all agree there is a truth and we can seek it together and find it together, then I think we can have a collegial and loving and respectful discourse, even as a nation. And that's what I would love to see. And that's what should have happened within the church. The problem and dysfunction in the United Methodist Church wasn't necessarily that we weren't all of one mind, but it was that the people who were in the minority, who were repeatedly shut down, weren't willing to listen. They weren't willing to respect and honor the perspectives of those on the other side. They weren't willing to even comprehend it at a certain point. They grew increasingly intolerant, and then they coercively took the gears of power and alienated the majority, the silent and loving majority, from their own denomination, which is the heartache of the last few years. And the very same people who hijacked the denomination are now in charge, and they're the ones issuing this statement. We find ourselves at a critical historical juncture that future generations will scrutinize. It presses upon the Council of Bishops of the United Methodist Church, a worldwide body, to speak and act with moral clarity, guided by the teachings of Jesus Christ and all our commitment to justice and compassion for all. What the silent part that they're not quite saying out loud is the current leadership that just won is so morally reprehensible that to go along with this new leadership in the White House is a humanitarian issue, and people in the future will look back and say, how could you have gone along with it? They're very much buying into this narrative that Donald Trump is the new Hitler, the party in control is the new Nazis, and just like we look back on Third Reich Germany and go, how could you go along with the Nazis? They're inferring that that's another historical moment that we're in right now. We affirm the inherent dignity of all God's children As our social principles remind us, quote, God calls all members of the human family to recognize and protect the dignity and worth of all people, end quote. The lessons of history teach us the dangers of silence in the face of threats to human rights. Therefore, we cannot remain silent. We call upon all United Methodists to exercise their faith and to pray, speak, and act for justice and peace. So they're not being explicit here, but the context makes clear that they think that the Trump administration is dehumanizing, is going to create classes of people that are persecuted. In particular, they're looking at the LGBTQ plus crew, which, by the way, I saw that the Reconciling Ministries Network, which is part of this, they were a special interest group that got special donor money from outside. The Arcus Foundation is where they got their money to change the UMC's stance. They've promoted VBS, pro-gay curriculum that was funded by the denomination. Anyway, they're bad faith actors, but they have started a hotline now for people to call in and vent their hysteria about Trump being in charge. It's important for people to know. I don't know how many people know this. Donald Trump's administration has done more to protect gay people internationally than any other administration. He very intentionally commissioned many ambassadors to make it an explicit goal of the United States to change the laws in other countries that outlaw sexual immorality. Trump has pushed that. His administration has pushed that more than any other administration I'm aware of. And they touted that while he was in office. They interviewed a number of ambassadors, one in particular that was explicitly openly gay. So I think part of the problem of the era that we're living in is that we gaslight each other. We don't listen to each other. We just roll our eyes at each other when one side gets worked up about something. And I don't think that's a helpful disposition to have. But I also have to just say, so much of there's this skit this guy does, stop making me defend Donald Trump. He's not the biggest fan of Donald Trump, but people continue to spout stuff from the media about Donald Trump that's false, and he has to correct that just for the sake of the truth. And they go, why are you defending Donald Trump? And that's how I feel sometimes, is like, there's plenty to be disappointed in. I do not like that Donald Trump contributed to inflation the way that he did at the end of his tenure. We had the COVID crisis, started just printing out all this money. Yes, Biden did the exact same thing, but it bothers me that Trump did that. It bothers me that he gave authority to people who made bad judgment calls with respect to the COVID response. These are problems, legitimate problems to have with Donald Trump. But there are so many other things that are trumped up by the media that just aren't true, like saying that what's-her-face needed to be put in front of a firing squad. When you look at the context of what he said, he was not at all being literal. He was talking about war hawks sending other people's kids off to war and needing to feel some empathy with them. So, there are so many false things that get touted, and you don't need to do that. The notion that Trump is anti-gay or anti-black and is going to create second-class citizens doesn't seem to have any real basis in reality. So the fact that the bishops are putting out this statement that is implying these things indicates that they're just uncritically watching network news, that they are of a mindset that doesn't engage these things critically, doesn't go to the source, but just takes what they're given and regurgitates the emotive manipulation of what they encounter on network news. Our baptismal vows call us to resist evil, injustice, and oppression in whatever forms they present themselves. We therefore reject rhetoric, policies, and actions that demean or discriminate against any of God's children, and will be vigilant in defending the rights of the vulnerable and speaking out against oppression. So this in particular is gearing people up for resisting any efforts to close the border, to deport people who entered the country illegally. There's so many people that can't even consider such things, because if you talk about illegal immigrants, they'll say things like, no person is illegal, which is ridiculous because you can do illegal things, but then you make it so that people can't even conceptualize of this stuff. And then whenever he talks about how Other countries are emptying their prisons and mental facilities and sending people across the borders, which has been shown to be true. As soon as he brings these things up, or people that come across the border and commit crimes, they say this is criminalizing all these people, dehumanizing all these people, and it makes it so that there can be no discernment in trying to um, rein in how crazy it is, how many people we've let in that are not being naturalized, that are not being socialized, that are causing harm. So what the bishops are doing in this statement is gearing people up for political turmoil and resisting the duly elected authority. And so whenever it's quoting, we have to resist evil, injustice, and oppression in whatever forms that they present themselves. They are christening, sanctifying disobedience, resistance, rebellion against authority. Now, is that always bad? No. We have the example of the apostles in Acts of the Apostles. Whenever worldly authorities call them and say, stop preaching in the name of Jesus, they say, we have to fear God rather than you. We have to obey God rather than you. We can't give you what you're asking for here. And that is a legitimate posture to take. That's a far cry from saying we need to make sure that the White House conforms to all of our values and morals, and if they don't, then we need to publicly speak and stand against them. That's Christian nationalism that I don't find. I mean, of course, a non-believer in the White House or a nominal believer in the White House is not going to govern according to the Bible as you read it. So, be tolerant of that. Tolerance is the virtue of the left. You have to be tolerant of people governing in ways, especially when there are laws on the book. We're a country of laws. You have to put what's on the books into action. But if you're gearing people up for resistance and you're taking a cultural side as bishops, I mean, there's been a long, long series of Episcopal leadership and decisions in the UMC siding with the Democrat Party, the cultural left, and making very clear that this is not going to be an organization of centrist or right-leaning people. Final paragraph. To people of all generations, especially our young, who learn for a more just and inclusive world, your vision of passion give us hope. We commit to working alongside you to build the beloved community that reflects God's kingdom on earth. In the days ahead, we will continue this vital work uninterrupted and with renewed vigor. And we commit ourselves to prayer for our political leaders around the globe. So that final, if that was all it was, it'd be fine. But in the context of the current historical moment and what came before, the language about building that beloved community should be read probably as largely synonymous with the neo-Marxist vision of the communist utopia being legislated from above and then conforming everybody to the equitable, equal, godless utopia, which is a vision that has moved the cultural left in this country popularly for 90 years. I don't know. It never works. It always goes in awful directions. That's largely what this red wave was, a rebuke of the cultural left trying to legislate their morality on the rest of us. And so in dialogue with the Frank Turek bit that we did earlier, can you legislate morality? The answer is, well, yeah, all laws have moral value. But then what happens when you try and legislate a morality on people that is foreign and unnatural? And the answer is what we just saw in the election. So we've already legislated a ton of morality. We're going to continue to legislate our morality. We have to do so in a healthy dialogue with the people on the ground. And when you talk past them, when you hate them, when you call them deplorables, bitter clingers, garbage, then there's going to be a reaction, and that's a legitimate reaction. And you can continue to hate them. You can continue to make high-minded, big pronouncements against them, but that is going to continue to alienate you, harm you, make you more bitter. And that's just not a helpful way to be. I hope we see a change in the discourse. I really wish that the Lord would bless the United Methodist bishops with an ounce of self-awareness and humility. I think that would be a really wonderful thing for this point in history, and the fact that they're digging their heels in and that they're not just giving permission to, but in a sense facilitating other people to dig their heels in is really unfortunate, I think. I think it shows a lack of spiritual discernment, a lack of serving an interest in serving the present age, a lack in healing the harm of the last few years, and is, well, I'm embarrassed for him, but I've been embarrassed for him for a long time.